Uh, well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Friday night study. Tonight, our guest speaker is Chris DeWeese, has a congregation in the Kansas City area, first century Christian. Wait a minute, I just screwed that, messed it up. What's your website, Chris?
firstcenturychristianity.net.
All right, go there. You can get his calendar and when he broadcasts and all the information about his congregation and him. So, with any further delay, turn it over to Chris.
All right. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. And I am presenting Hanukkah and Matthew 24. Hopefully that piqued your interest. So that is a picture of our home menorah, and we don't use the 9-candle Hanukkah. We use a 7-candle menorah. It's a 7-candle candlestick. It's called a menorah, but it's not, because the menorah is an oil lamp and this is a candlestick. But that's not what it means. And Hanukkah in Matthew 24, Hanukkah is it's really helpful to understand the real history of Hanukkah when we start talking about the New Testament, specifically Matthew 24, specifically our New Testament theology and our New Testament eschatology, like what's going to happen later on. So the word Hanukkah, I have it spelt a little different than you see. It's spelled so many different ways because it's representing letters that are not present in English, and it's really pronounced Chanukkah, like you're clearing your throat. It's a het, right? Hanukkah in Matthew 24. So the word is really important. The word is a very Torah word. It means dedication. It doesn't actually have anything to do with the menorah itself, other than what we're going to get into later. The relighting of it, the relighting of the real one. But the word, when the Torah goes and talks about dedicating the temple and dedicating the altar and dedicating the things for worship, for the temple service, this is the word. And so the actual called Festival of Hanukkah or Feast of Hanukkah, which we all know is not a Levitical feast, is talking about the feast that commemorates the rededication of the temple after it was defiled by the Greeks. And this festival is not part of Yahweh's appointed times, but it was definitely a part of Jewish life in the first century. We know Yeshua was at the temple at the Feast of Dedication, recorded in John 10:22, and it's recorded in such a way as it kind of expects the reader to know what the Feast of Dedication actually was all about. And the word is right there. It's not the Festival of Lights, it's the Festival of Dedication. And that's where they asked him if he was the Christ, meaning the Messiah, specifically at that time. We're going to get into that a little bit later, maybe, if I remember correctly. But for those of us who've studied Hanukkah, this banter has a lot more meaning, a ton more meaning than a miracle of oil, which really is a legend. The miracle of the oil lasting 8 days, that they didn't have enough, that could have happened. It could be a thing, but we actually have two historical books that record the history of Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication, and how it came to be. And they don't mention anything about that miracle. So that's the official record. Those are called the first and second book of Maccabees. And it's not like in the New Testament where you have, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, all written by the same guy. The 4 total books of Maccabees are written by different people, and I don't think the authors are actually known. And they were written in Greek. And the fact that they were written in Greek is pretty much the only reason I could find why they were not included in the Old Testament canon. 1 and 2 Maccabees are good, and they're kind of in order of goodness in the books. And they are in the Old Testament canon for the Septuagint. And for those who don't know what that is, if you ever see somebody do LXX, that's the Greek letter for 70, and it's a reference to the 70 rabbis that translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek about 150 years before Yeshua. The Greek language had overtaken the entire world, and this was the first time that the Bible was translated and assembled into what we would call a canon. And so it contains a few more books than our 66-book Bible contained for the Old Testament. The Maccabees, it has something called Tobit, Jubilees. It has a few more books, and it is the basis for the New Testament canon as well. The Septuagint was the starting point for having a complete Bible from Genesis to Revelation. So there's a website, ebible.org, has a very good translation of the Septuagint into English that I recommend, called the Brenton translation. And Lord Brenton was a British nobleman, I think. Yeah, Lord Brenton, he was a nobleman. And he translated the Septuagint from Greek into English, I don't know, maybe 150 years ago. It's not that old, but it reads really, really close to the English translations of the New Testament, which we know were written in Greek. The Septuagint was probably the Bible of the synagogue. The synagogue is a Greek word that the rabbis used for kahal, for assembly, when they talked about, having the congregation, the congregation of Israel, the assembly of Israel, right? When they translated that into Greek, they used the word synagogue. That word turned into effectively church. A synagogue, as a Jewish synagogue today, we would just think of that as being a place where Jewish people go to worship. I don't know why Jews didn't. The Jewish people did not translate that back one more step into Hebrew, but they didn't, and so that's where the word synagogue comes from. So I really encourage you. The big picture thing here today is to encourage everybody to just go find one Maccabees, preferably from the Brenton translation, and just read it. And that's it. And just know about what happened the first time the temple was defiled like that. And it's very, you will be very familiar with the language and with what happened, because it's a foreshadowing of some New Testament stuff. So the absurdly abridged true version of Hanukkah is that it's the observance of the temple being cleansed and rededicated after the Greeks defiled it under Antiochus Epiphanes. When the Greeks took over Judea, many Jews decided to become Greek. They decided to shed their identity as basically sons of God, and they decided to become of the world. And they wanted to do the wrestling in the gymnasium, and in order to do that, what circumcision is, so they had to uncircumcise themselves. They completely, a certain number of people in Judea completely sold out their identity as children of God. And the Greeks went through the entire land and destroyed the Torah portion, Torahs, scrolls. Anybody caught reading a Torah was put to death. Any woman who circumcised her son was awful things were done to the woman and to the son. And the Greeks went through and they wanted to erase the faith of Abraham from the earth and bring those people into the polytheistic paganism that they worshipped. And so there was a small band of believers who couldn't take it when they saw something get defiled, and their leader was called Judas Maccabeus. And when he got really upset with what was happening and with his countrymen not fighting back, they executed a Greek official, and they started a revolution. And during this revolution, when you Matthew 24, when Yeshua says, "Pray that your flight not be on a Sabbath," is actually a reference to the Maccabean revolt, because they all had to flee Judea to the mountains to run away from the Greek army in order to be free and to start their revolution. And the first time that the Greeks found them, it was on a Sabbath day. And they refused to fight, which got them all killed. So then they had to say, okay, well, we're going to have to fight on the Sabbath now. We're going to have to do that. And so that's one of the references from Matthew 24 that goes back to the Maccabees that makes you raise your eyebrow. And the miracle here is that Judas Maccabeus, his name means Judah the Hammer, was successful in starting the revolution, and it was his sons who finished it off and routed the Greeks from Judea. And once they routed the Greeks, they went about the business of restoring the Torah. And they went all the way through Judea. They did awful things to the people that sold out and didn't flee. And they purified the land. They purified the temple. And that's the whole story of it. It's a rededication of the temple. And to me, one of the most striking parts of the story is that I think it's, what is he? I don't want to misspeak, but one of the Maccabees kids was in charge when they went and undefiled the altar, because the Greeks had set up the abomination of desolation on the altar by slaughtering a pig on Yahweh's altar, which defiled it. So they took the blocks off that were defiled with the swine's blood, and they piled them up. And when they went up to the leader, the kingly kind of leader, and said, "What do we do with those blocks?" He said, basically, "I don't know. We have to wait for a prophet to come tell us what to do with those blocks. Because you have these blocks that were holy, they were sanctified, then they were defiled, so you can't use them for anything. Are you supposed to destroy them? How do you get rid of them? It's a lot of them." They built a pile and said, "We're going to wait for a prophet to come tell us." And then they restored the altar. Now, that level of humility, that when after you're winning the battle, you're routing people, that's when people are prone to fall and overstep. And it's very noteworthy to me that they didn't overstep. So when they rededicated the temple and they restarted the service, they held an 8-day festival like Sukkot in order to celebrate it in the month Kislev, right? So in the winter, the festival of rededication, to honor rededicating the temple, the best thing they knew how to do was to have a Sukkot, to have a big party in the name of Yahweh, to thank him for blessing them and allowing them to free themselves from the Greeks and to have the temple back. So that's how they celebrated it. And then they made it a rule that they were going to make a yearly commemoration of it. And that's how it came to be. And Hanukkah, as I understand it, in Israeli Jewish circles, is not really as big of a deal to them as it is to, except here in the West, because it's something that happens about the same time as Christmas every year. So it's kind of a substitute. So the festival is 8 days long because it's like Sukkot. It's not 8 days long because of some miracle of oil. Now, maybe there was a miracle of oil. I don't know, one way or the other. But I actually am inclined to not believe it because it wasn't recorded in the official, record of the 1 and 2 Maccabees are actually kind of, think of them as news reports. So somebody witnessed the things that happened and wrote them all down and then distributed to the Jews that were still in the exile to tell them, hey, it's safe to come back if you guys want to come back. So now that you have the absurdly abridged version of Hanukkah, let me explain what they were really asking Yeshua in John 10 when he was at the temple at the Feast of Dedication. And they said, well, if you're the Christ, just tell us. What they were looking for him to do was to become like Judas Maccabeus. They knew he had all these signs and wonders. They knew he was very powerful, but they were looking for somebody to set off a military rebellion against Rome to push the Romans out and rededicate the land and rededicate the temple and free them. And so he didn't actually, I don't believe he actually answered their question at that time, but we're going to get to the Matthew 24 link here in just a second. In fact, let's just go there now. So in Matthew 24, 1 and 2, Yeshua left the temple area and was going on his way when his disciples came up to a point to point out the temple buildings to him. But he responded and said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down." So this is that connection of Hanukkah to Matthew 24 is kind of the opposite of what the people were looking for. The biggest sign of the Messiah is something that comes from the book of Daniel, that the temple was going to come down when the Messiah came, not be restored. And for some reason, they all got it wrong. They all thought that probably because of Judas Maccabeus, they all kind of thought that the next Messiah was going to do that. And I just said something, you might have raised your eyebrow, the next Messiah. The word Messiah, Mashiach in Hebrew, is anointed one. And it is not an exclusive term to Yeshua. Now, Yeshua is the ultimate Messiah. There's nobody greater than Yeshua except for Yahweh, right? But when you read the whole Septuagint, the whole Old Testament in Greek, you will see other people called Christ, like David and anybody who's Yahweh's anointed, because the word Mashiach turned into Christos when it turned into the Septuagint. So when you say a Christ, there are anointed people, right? We all know that King David had oil poured on him. He was Yahweh's anointed one, right? But the ultimate Messiah is Yeshua. So don't think that I'm, trying to belittle Yeshua's place in the cosmos when I say things like that. So in an earlier message, which hopefully you guys go to firstcenturychristianity.net, check it out. I talk about the destruction of the second temple in detail, but it was really the destruction of all Judea. And that was the ultimate sign that the Messiah had come. And so Matthew 24:2 should really be in all caps, quote, showing that it's a quote of the Old Testament. And we're going to look at that right now. So in Daniel 9:26 and 27, I got a thing in my way on here. So it says, "Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end, there will be war. Desolations are determined. And he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come the one who makes desolate, until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, gushes forth on the one who makes desolate." So you see here that the Messiah, is tied to the destruction of Judea, a complete destruction. The Messiah is not tied to the restoration of Judea like had been done before. This is where those of us who accept Yeshua as the Messiah, we accept the New Testament, the New Covenant, we see there's a change. There's that they were not supposed to be looking for, and they were not ultimately looking for the restoration of the temple. They were looking for the destruction of it, which was kind of opposite world if you are, a Torah follower. And so Matthew 24:2 should be in all caps because it's referencing this. And now, earlier I talked about the Septuagint translation. We're going to look at that now because it really does sound more like the way we think, because we are New Testament believers, right? So in the Brenton translation, of the Septuagint. It says, after the 62 weeks, the anointed one shall be destroyed, and there is no judgment in him. And he shall destroy the city and the sanctuary with the prince that is coming. They shall be cut off with a flood to the end of the war, which is rapidly completed. He shall appoint the city to desolations. After and 1 week shall establish the covenant with many. And in the midst of the week, my sacrifice and drink offering shall be taken away, and on the temple shall be the abomination of desolations. And at the end of time, an end shall be put to the desolation. Wow. That's, if you're people like us who spend a lot of time reading the Bible, that sounds a whole lot more like New Testament theology and eschatology than the other one. Because the other version is looking for a restoration of the temple. And we are the people that have had the covenant established with the many. We're part of that many. And we're not necessarily looking for the restoration of the earthly temple, are we? We're looking for something a little bit bigger, right? And so, he goes on further in Matthew 24 to talk about wars and rumors of wars. And there's a big thing that Yeshua talks about. It says, be wary of false Christs, false messiahs. And what's interesting is that the false messiahs almost all had the same wrong message. Their wrong message was, we're going to throw those Romans out of here, and we're going to put the temple back, and we're going to restore Judea like the Maccabees did. Only the true Messiah had come and said, the whole thing's coming down. Not just the abomination this time. The whole thing's going to be leveled. And they should have understood it. They should have understood that. So now it means a little bit more when he says, you didn't recognize me in the time of your visitation. They should have known that the temple was going to come down again. But who wants your temple to come down? Right? Who wants your own house to be torn down? Nobody wants that torn down, right? And they had to be blinded in order to not see him for the events to take place. So here we get to Matthew 24, 1-5. Yeshua left the temple area and was going on his way when his disciples came up to him to point out the temple buildings to him. But he responded and said to them, Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another which will not be torn down. Now, my Bible, my NASB Bible, has a separation right here between the next. It has an artificial separation there that's not supposed to be there. Remember, the chapters, the verses, and the labels and all the hints that we have are put there by mankind, and sometimes they help and sometimes they don't. In this case, they hurt, because when you see the separation, you forget. You jump right to verse, verse 3, and say, oh, you're sitting on the Mount of Olives. And they said, when will these things happen? They're asked, these things that they're asking about are right above it. When is the stone going to come down? When is that going to happen? And they said, tell me that. When is the sign of the coming of your coming and the end of the age? See, these guys are starting to get it. They're starting to realize that, wait a minute, if the temple's coming down, it's, what's coming? When is it going to happen? And he said, see to it that no one misleads you, for many will come in my name saying, I'm the Messiah, and they'll mislead many people. Well, what happened to the people who didn't think the temple was going to come down? That's in the graphic message I gave about the destruction of the temple. They got killed in awful ways. I think it's like 1 million people died total, taking out Judea. Rome started at one end of Judea, and they didn't quit till the entire thing was desolate, and they erased Jewish people from that land until roughly 1930s, 1940s, maybe. I mean, they did after we do have the, NATO, not NATO, whatever, the United Nations or whoever who recreated Israel, but there were Israeli or Jewish people who had started to go back to the land way before that. So that desolation was very long, and one could argue that it's still pretty desolate. It's still filled with the abominations. So just understand that, the abomination of desolation had already happened once when he said it was going to happen again. And then now it's already happened twice. Because when the Romans destroyed Judea, they defiled the sanctuary and then they tore it down. So the abomination of desolation is now 2 times, and in the Septuagint it says it's going to stay that way until the end. That meshes a little bit more with what we believe, doesn't it, brothers and sisters? So, what do we do with Hanukkah now? Right? I'm coming to the end of the message, because it's not a commanded festival, so we're under no obligation to observe it. We don't take any time off for it. We don't give any gifts or anything like that. But to understand it, to read the first Maccabees, maybe second Maccabees if you're ambitious, to read that and understand that Yeshua was talking at a moment in time where that rebellion was still fresh in their memories. It was only 200 years prior, right? And now Rome's back, the same situation again. Read about it, understand it. You might come to want to commemorate it like we do at our household, or maybe you don't. Who knows? But this is the Feast of Dedication, is a remembrance of the Jews getting rid of paganism and restoring Judea to proper worship and governance. Aren't we looking for that? Isn't that something that we want? As I've been stuck out here traveling and all these people are saying, I hope you make it home for Christmas. And I'm like, well, I hope I make it home for December 25th. I actually hope I make it home on December 24th, right? Christmas is not special to us. And aren't we looking forward to a time where this paganism is gone, where the land is really fully restored? We're looking forward to not just Judea being cleansed of its sins, but we're looking forward to the temple that was not made with hands coming down. The never defiled temple coming down from heaven when the Messiah returns. We're looking forward to that proper governance with Yeshua as our king and Yahweh as our God. My family lights a 7-candle menorah during Hanukkah to remember the rededication of the temple and the faithful who were willing to go to war with nothing rather than serve the pagan kings. That's and another thing that's about the Maccabees that I really encourage, I love this story, right? Is that they were recognized as defeating the Greeks because of their manliness, because of exercising raw masculinity. And this doesn't slight femininity at all, but there's a branch. And our society today is failing enormously because of a lack of masculinity, a lack of gruff men looking at children and saying, no, smack, right? That, women sometimes do that, but it's just different. And you guys know that. So, this is a tradition, not a commandment, but Yeshua did appear to observe it. And John recorded it. So I think it's important to commemorate it. Thank you guys for listening to me. And the most important thing I think we can do about it is to read about it, to understand the true history, and let that inform our current belief system. So that's all I've got for y'all. And now I start the fun part. Right? Or Don gets on and says, hey, I couldn't hear you. Could you do that again?
I couldn't hear you. Can you do that again? All right. This time you can ask questions, make comments, suggestions. All you have to do is raise your hand. Raising the hand is in the reactions. When you put your cursor in the bottom of the window, you will see reactions. You click on reactions and a bar pops up. I mean, you've got all sorts of neat things you can put up there, or you could raise your hand. For those people on the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. So any questions or comments?
So, and I don't usually use this computer built-in camera. My computer's small, so I have to get in here to see it. So I
Oh, you're
realize I'm
fine.
like
You look
giving
really
you
good.
guys the eye, right? You know, so hey,
Ever.
Yeah, I suppose I'll ask something. I don't necessarily know what you're going to say here. Do you see any connections between the abomination of desolation and I guess the connection to Hanukkah beyond, or that would apply to the future?
so maybe, but let's look at Israel right now. Okay, that part, that big chunk of blocks that we think is the last part of the Holy Temple, what's on top of it?
The Dome of the Rock, probably.
The dome, right, right. So there's one abomination of desolation, right? What else goes on over there? Tel Aviv is the gayest city on earth. What is that called in the Torah? Okay, right?
Another
I mean,
abomination.
It's called an abomination, right? And then so it's not undesolate yet. And so, but I'm not one who thinks that we're going to that I don't think we're waiting for a temple to be rebuilt to be knocked down again. Right? I see why people see that in the scriptures, right? Because there's some places where it says that you need that. But that would mean that we are 100 years away from the return, 200 years, right? In order to get that land turned around and purged of its evil and restored, which they could do, right? Israel's a mighty nation right now. They could do it. They would first have to want to do that. They don't want to do it. They're very happy with their kind of liberal Western democracy, right? And they're not. It's not really a religious country. It's a secular country that happens to keep the Sabbath. So if that has to happen again, then we're a far piece away, because then you have in that scenario you have to look at the entire world wanting to be religious, right? For the entire world to desire some type of a religion, and we're not anywhere near that today, right? We're so far, we're denying the existence of the Creator, daily, right? Moment by moment in the public school system and everywhere. So if that's the case, if that needs to happen, which I don't think it needs to happen, I'm not saying it can't happen, but we're a far piece away from that, from the restoration of Judea. So that's my answer.
That's fine. Yeah. I think we need to be flexible in everything relating to the future, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Right.
Pam?
I was listening to someone talk about this topic, and she mentioned why she thought it was an optional or an extra festival that could be kept, similar to the concept that we're commanded to do our tithing and then we have offerings. So she likened this festival as something that has a special blessing, a special understanding to it. Could you comment if you've seen any, your comment about that you don't have to do it, but you can do it like you're doing it. It's a blessing, extra blessing.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I would have to tell you all after this. I probably don't have to tell you all, but I'm a big fan of the Maccabean revolt. I'm a fan of the manliness. I'm the fan of them, stepping out in faith and taking action. And I like commemorating this. And by the way, the festival started when they relit the menorah. Once they relit the menorah, it kind of told everybody, hey, we're back in business. And that's a good thing to commemorate. And obviously we're allowed to have other commemorations as long as they don't take a life of their own and start replacing, the true days or even infringing upon them, So it's not, to me, it's not bad to do, but the big hurdle to that, Pam, is that we don't have any instructions as to what to do, right? When you look at the Levitical days, we know from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, do no work, have a holy convocation, right? We go down the whole list. We know what we're supposed to do, or we know what was supposed to be done at the temple in some of the cases, like the wave sheaf and all that. In this one, we're kind of having to call an audible on this one. So I think it's a good thing to commemorate, and I encourage people to read about it. But at the same time, I'm on a business trip this week. I'm not going to change my life for to commemorate Hanukkah, and I'm not running around yelling Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah to everybody that tells me Merry Christmas. I'm not doing that. But yeah, I think it's good, and getting a blessing from it. I think that the biggest blessing you can get is to understand what happened and how that informs your vision of the New Testament. Because to me, everything's all about the Messiah. Everything before points to him, and everything after flows out of him. So the more you can know about the Messiah, the better you are. All right. I don't know if that was a good enough answer, or you could follow up.
Igor?
Yeah, let no man deceive you. That was understood as a broad, in the context of broad teachings of Messiah. And people can come and mislead you in any of the items, in any of the directions away from it. But you hit a bullseye that within Mathew 24, when he was saying one stone will not stand upon another, implying destruction of temple. And people would always come back of restoring temple, rebuilding third temple. And there you go. That's one way, perhaps within Matthew 24, they're deceiving themselves and deceiving others.
So I have a question back to you, right?
Yeah.
What did they crucify Yeshua for saying?
Lest Romans come and take away us and our temple and our position, all these things.
They crucified him for, he said that he would tear down the temple and it would be rebuilt in 3 days. And they said, what more do we need to hear from this blasphemer?
Sure.
They killed him for the prophecy that's true. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Interestingly, their reasoning was proved to be totally wrong. See, they lost their position and they lost the temple, and Romans came and decimated all of them. Their reasoning was so faulty because there is no counsel or knowledge or understanding against God. So they're in the opposite camp. anyway, I would come back with a little bit more of my comments, let others participate. But thank you, good presentation. It was a surprise message. I was thinking like what you would be dealing, how on earth can you relate this with Matthew 24? Yeah, it's nice.
Everett?
Yeah, I know there are all kinds of ways to look at this, what I'm going to comment on. But I raised my family keeping the Sabbath and holy days. My children have not followed in that path, but at one point in time, my son sort of pulled me aside and said, well, isn't Christmas just a national holy holiday? It's not really all that religious anyway. So does it really make any difference? And, to a certain degree, I would have to agree with that. I don't like where it came from, and that hasn't changed. But the funny thing about it is he was engaged at that time to a girl who was a Jew, who was totally secular. I don't know if she's ever been in the synagogue, but I kicked myself for not saying, well, instead of doing Christmas, why don't you do Hanukkah? At least we know where that came from and what it's trying to picture. Now, it's been corrupted, I think, to a large degree because the Jews are trying to keep up with the Christians in celebration and giving presents and all that sort of stuff. But I really wish that I had suggested that at the time. And if I ever get a chance, I'm gonna do that.
So yeah, as far as Christmas being a national holiday, there's a ton of truth in that today, right? Because I've seen atheists who are putting up the tree, right? It's for most Americans, and if you think about the Christmas music we hear today, has nothing to do with Jesus whatsoever. It's Mariah Carey talking about breaking up with somebody on Christmas, right? I mean, it has nothing to do with religion at all. Yeah. And so it has become that, but we know where it came from. We have to run away from it. We can't just adopt it because we don't do it, because we don't say that Christians can Christianize it, right? And we don't do it because people are secularizing it. Christmas is what it is. It's another one of these abominations, and regardless of what Satan does with that holiday, he can put lipstick on the pig or he can put tinsel on the pig. It's still a pig, right? So we can't do anything with it. But you're right. It is a hard thing every year. I lament the fact that even though those of us here know the truth about Christmas and Easter and Sunday and all of that, this nation was a lot more godly when everybody was flocking to the churches at midnight on December 24th. They were doing it wrong, but at least they feared God, So, Anybody else? Or follow up? You guys are such a tough crowd.
Alan?
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I'm cold, man.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the reference about fleeing to the mountains. I never thought about that before. That was something, I guess now that, since you said that, it occurred to me that many times throughout biblical history, when cities were overtaken, people fled to the mountains. If you remember, even the King Zedekiah, when Nebuchadnezzar came in, he was caught fleeing across the fields, So it's a phrase that really applies to many campaigns throughout biblical history where people had to try to get away and hide. But thank you for that. I did want to turn your attention over to a different temple altogether, and that is in 2 Thessalonians in chapter 2, where once again we see a phrase about being deceived. If we look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 3, and we read down from the warning about being deceived to a temple that is occupied by somebody. I'll start in verse 3 and read down. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless there be a falling away first. Now, when you mention that many in Judea sided over to the Greeks to save their skin, that kind of falls in line with this right here.
Yeah.
A falling away coming first. So there's some parallels here. And the man of sin is revealed, the son of destruction, perdition, who opposes and exalts himself, Antiochus, above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God, and that would be all the blasphemy that took place at that time, but also in the temple today, that is this temple that we have as we're all part of an assembly of a temple. So there's also this aspect to it, and that's why I'm reading from 2 Thessalonians to try to tie it into the spiritual body of Christ at the end of the age, which includes a falling away. It includes someone who is invading the temple, an ungodly son of perdition, who exalts himself. So we see how this in a very complex way causes us to search ourselves to see if our temple has been invaded and desecrated, and if we need restoration in our temple as well. Reading down a little bit more, all that is worship is he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Do you not remember that when I was with you in Thessalonica, I told you about these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. So we see how this can tie into eschatology very well. This temple, the temple at the time of Antiochus and Judas Maccabeus, the temple in AD 70. And there is today, as you said, a destruction of the last temple, in part.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. We live in post-Christian America, we post-Christian West. So yeah, I see what, the falling, the worldliness, right? There's no separation. You can't really tell a Christian from a non-Christian today. To me, but I don't know.
Verse 7 adds a little spice to it. He says,
yeah,
for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work.
Yeah.
And he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. And so Antiochus was taken out of the way, and Judas came in and restored. And this pattern is a reoccurring pattern, and it also reoccurs in individuals, spiritually speaking, throughout the ages.
All right. Am I still sharing my screen? No.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, I'm good with that. Unless you have a question mark at the end of it, then I don't know what to say.
I was gonna say, if you want to share your screen, Chris, you can.
No, I was the way I'm moving Zoom out of the way so I could read along with Alan. And
Oh.
there's a banner that made it look like you guys could see what I was doing, and I didn't want that to happen. Oh yeah.
The bedroom on the shelf. All right, I just wondered if you had considered that could tie in or not, that's all.
Hadn't considered it, but not ruling it out. Yeah.
Stan?
Yeah, Alan, getting back to what you said about how we need to examine our own temple to see if it's been invaded, would it be consistent to say that if anyone has exalted himself in our own temple, it's partially because we have been careless and have allowed that to happen? I'm done.
Yes, Stan, and that is our own idolatry, because we live in an age of luxury and of materialism. And because of that, every one of us has some degree of idolatry in varying degrees. What Chris was getting at about being manly and being, what was the other word you used?
Masculine.
The masculinity of Judas and his soldiers and the men of old that were with David and all the other men, such as Abraham when he went after Lot and rescued Lot after the slaughter of the kings. This is kind of a lost quality. If you're going to do spiritual battle, I would hope that you could somehow be tough enough and be courageous enough and be willing to suffer whatever slings and arrows of battle would be necessary for you to cleanse your temple.
So,
But we're weakened. It seems like we're weak people, and it's now I'm not saying anyone individually here, but I'm just saying in a general sense.
yeah.
I kind of get a feeling that there's a lack of zeal and there's not any fire inside of people to go to battle, and so we kind of just plug along and we live day to day in our luxuries and we enjoy our lives, and it really is counter. It runs against the progress of spiritual growth.
So I run with that one, because that's when you see these videos in the news of and my wife works at she got a temporary job at Macy's 3 years ago. She's still at Macy's, right? But people come in and just steal stuff. They just come in and take it. And she's like, she wants to pound them, but she's not allowed, right? And so we're burning the fire down ourselves when we see something go wrong in public, right? Do we help, or do we go, oh, well, you know what? Because there was a guy in New York City who he was being held up by the same guy over and over again. He finally clobbers the guy. He goes to jail, right? And we're like, what's going on in the world, right? So we do need, we do need to get that sense of right and wrong. But because we live in a society that doesn't have a right and wrong, we're losing what right and wrong is, right? If somebody goes and just starts stealing or starts beating on somebody, 30 years ago, the reaction of any crowd in the US would have been smack, knock it off, cops, take this guy away. And the cops would come take him away. And now we can't, because you don't want to, because you're like, oh, I'm going to end up in court. I'm going to get sued. The criminal has more rights than me. So we're conditioning ourselves to not have that, the reaction that a just person should have.
So, Chris, if I can jump in,
Yeah.
I guess what you're saying, enough of us do not sigh and cry for the abominations. I'm done.
Yeah. That's it. And we get all excited when somebody stands up in a microphone and just says a man is a man, as a woman is a woman. We're like, yeah, give them the what for. We should all be doing that, right? We're like, yeah, the video goes viral, right? I can't believe they were brave enough to say that. I mean, what do you mean you're brave enough to say that? That's just not truth. Yeah.
Bill?
Can you hear me okay?
Lima
Am I
Charlie.
coming okay?
Lima
I can
Charlie.
hear you.
Yes, sir.
The word the Greek word for falling away is apostasia, where we get our word apostasy. And like Strong says, defection from the truth. So there's no connotation of falling like falling off a chair. It's apostasy that comes in, and the man of sin being revealed. I suspect that that's happened over and over. And I look at when the teachings of the Sabbath and holy days was done away with, and Sunday, Christmas, and Easter were brought in that large group we formerly were part of, many of us, that was one of the times that the apostasy, the falling away took place. And the man of sin, I would think, would maybe be Satan, who invades. It was similar to what Alan was mentioning, invades the temple. I'm done.
So, I am lax in my Greek studies. I'm heavy on the Hebrew studies. So apostasy and falling away, I have to flip it to teshuva and panaim. Panaim is face, right? Yahweh's face. So when you fall away, right? What does the Torah say? You don't turn to the right or the left, right? You don't go after the false gods. What happens is Israel, like when they were camped around the tent of meeting, they were camped around it. They were all facing the tent of meeting, which is where the glory, the Shekinah, comes down, right? So they were all facing Yahweh. And when they went after the other gods, right? Let's just pretend my camera is where the tent of meeting was. When they went after other gods, they did this. They turned around. That's your apostasy. That's your falling away. When they start saying, hey, what's up? Look at those Moabite gals. Oh, hey, look at the Asherah pole, right? And they start turning away. Teshuvah is turning back around, is to return to face Yahweh. So when you turn away from Yahweh, you start walking away from that tent of meeting or from the temple or from Yeshua. You spiritually and physically drift away. And he's wanting for us to turn back, right? So the opposite of apostasy is repentance. So he wants us to turn back, and we could be afar off. Think about the prodigal son. The prodigal son turned away from the way of the way, turned away from life, and went far away, slopping hogs. Then when he decided to turn around, he faced his father and starts coming back. And that's where we want to be. We want to be the people who are coming back and every day working closer and closer and closer. Part of that has to do with the justice, right? We have the pagan stuff that we got to get rid of, but we also just have this pure, this simple justice of not letting people get ripped off and beaten in the streets. So the Torah is this comprehensive thing, and we turn around, we study, and we start going back. And if you're on the phone, you didn't see me talking with my hand and turning around and turning back. So I'm sorry, I'm done.
Well, what about the man of sin being revealed? That's part of that scripture.
I actually wasn't really talking about that scripture anymore. But I mean, what at this point, Bill? Let's just say, is there a man of sin today? Is there one? I think we lost track, right? Right? How could you narrow it down to one today? So yeah, the man of sin, the lawless one, will be revealed, but lawlessness is everywhere. And I think the difficulty would be narrowing it down to one lawless one.
Igor?
Yeah, there was a shoplifting problem in Christian stores.
Oh, that's terrible.
Anyway, that's not my main comment. abomination, desolation, it's an interesting thing. When Christ said, when you see, or whenever you see the abomination, desolation, then those who are in Judea flee to the mountains.
Those who are in Judea,
There are
not
lots
Missouri.
of things.
Yeah.
And every sentence is a loaded statement. And then he refers to Prophet Daniel as spoken of by Prophet Daniel. And first of all, you have to define the terms. What is holy place? What is abomination? What is desolation? And what is seeing? And what is fleeing? What is Judea, and what are mountains? Which mountains? So, there are lots of open-ended things in that. I heard a study. It's kind of ironical. You guys are Hebrew scholars, Everett and you, but still I want to say some from my notes. The word abomination is shikutz, however you say. That word abomination means disgusting, filthy, pointing to an idol. It's disgusting and filthy to God. That is abomination. So that's what was happening. And the desolation, the word desolation is shamem in Hebrew again, to stun, to stupefy, to make somebody numb. Isn't it interesting? The nuances. This thing, abomination, some idolatry, detestable thing happening, and it is numbing your senses and stupefying. And then if you go to Daniel, there are like 3 or 4 references to abomination, desolation, and all of them have an interesting hidden thing. Like the desolation, abomination, desolation doesn't happen like that. There is a precursor event that always takes place. That is the daily taken away.
Oh,
The daily is taken away, and the abomination is set up that makes things desolate.
yes.
That is the phraseology. So something is taken away before this is instituted. And I think it is going in parallel to what Alan said. The apostasy is happening. That's true. That is kind of abomination. But before that, the daily has to be taken away. And somebody did daily. What is daily? And the word sacrifice was introduced. It is in italics in King James. We always read daily sacrifices are taken away. There's no sacrifice in original text. So only daily is taken away. And the daily is an interesting word. When you see symbologically, it points to Christ or truth. When Christ is taken away, then this abomination that maketh desolate is set up. And then whenever you see in context of spiritual temple, then you flee to mountains. So see, there are different layers people study and read. So I'll shut my mouth. I'm not speaking tonight.
Well, you keep talking if you want, but the italics part in Hebrew, there's a lot of italics in Hebrew because it doesn't when it says the daily, right? If sometimes in your when you flip it to the thing with the numbers, it'll have 2 words with the same number on it because there's a lot of stuff that's assumed. But okay, now I'm done for this comment.
Bill and then Stan.
Yeah, what Tagore says is correct there. It's the abomination which stupefies. And I've studied this for some 20 years. That word, and it's also correct, there's no word sacrifice in all 3 places in Daniel. The Hebrew word for daily is actually, and from Wilson's Old Testament word studies, it actually means perpetual time as moving on continually without interruption. When Jesus said, when you see the abomination which makes desolate, then he says, let him that reads understand, which is a strange statement. But yeah, the word means the regular or the time, perpetual time is going on without interruption. When I was looking in the internet, the Encyclopedia Britannica under calendars, they said there's no reason for the 7-day week to exist in a month and a year. It doesn't fit. Without the Mosaic ritual, there's no reason for the 7-day week. So in the time of Caesar, they had a 10-day week. And there were certain days dedicated to the gods, and then certain days when you could buy or sell. I was telling this to one of my actually good friend, but actually a pastor in the United, and he said, well, you know about the French Reformation calendar, right? And I go, what? And he said, for 12 years in Europe, the French did away with the 7-day week and put in a 10-day week. And it was basically against all religion. And so I don't know, I don't know, but it has a lot of what you brought up about there's no word sacrifice. And Wilson's Old Testament says the word means perpetual time is going on without interruption. It's the Sabbath that has gone on without interruption since the creation. And when I found out, when they told me about the French Revolution calendar for 12 years being forced on Europe, a 10-day week, I was like, what? Anyway, whatever it is, as Tagore said, it's the abomination stupefies.
So you know that the Euros are really big into the metric system. So obvious they want to have base 10 everywhere. I'm just saying, that was funny. So when you guys say the word sacrifice isn't there, I don't know, I just reading it again. In the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate. So, I mean, he did the destruction of the temple, put a stop to sacrifice. So whether that word's there or not, that's what happened, and that was the intent. You know, but I haven't clicked into KJV, which for those of you who've listened to me before, I do actually have a KJV. It comes with eSword. You can't get rid of it. But I'm kidding, right? But I looked at it, and it says the word sacrifice is there to put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. So yeah, I don't know where you're going with the whole.
Well, the Hebrew word minchah is one word for offering, terumah is another, and korban is another.
Yeah.
And I don't think that any of them are there in that.
Zabak, Micha, but this is Daniel, so this could be, no, it's not Chaldee. Sometimes Daniel's in Chaldean, but yeah, this is a portion, euphemistically tribute, special offering. And then this one is Zabak, properly a slaughter, the flesh of an animal, by implication a sacrifice. Yeah, I mean, that was and then the desolation is, yeah, stupefies in there for sure. It's got a lot of stuff. Amazed, astonished. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it's, and then if I flip over to the Greek, if I flip over to Brenton, it even says, and in the midst of the week, my sacrifice and drink offering shall be taken away. And on the temple shall be the abomination of desolation. So, yeah.
Stan?
Yeah, Chris, I think earlier you were talking about people turning their backs. I forget if you said away from the temple, but it brought to mind a scripture, and I wanted to locate it, and I did find it. Ezekiel 8:15 and 16, kind of jumping into a thought in a way, but not really out of context. Then he said unto me, have you seen this, O son of man? Turn you yet again, and you shall see greater abominations than these. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord between the porch and the altar were about 5 and 20 men with their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east. So here are these men, because of their positioning, simultaneously turning their backs on God and the true God, and at the same time turning their faces toward a false God. I'm done.
Very good. Very good. Yep. And that was from
Any
the guy
other
who couldn't
comments?
see me. So
Geigers?
Yeah, hi. I've been on the phone with Tom and Marlene Carestas, so I missed almost all of the discussion. But I'm not sure what all was brought up. But I just, when you're looking at this topic, and again, I apologize, I don't really know what thoughts have been put forward. Well, we do know that there will be martyrdom coming. That's quite clear. The fifth seal addresses that. It refers to the dragon pursuing the remnant of the woman's of the children, and the beast power also overtakes the saints, I think is the way it's put. But just as a potential different explanation of what this might be, I think it's really interesting that Christ went to great lengths to de-emphasize the building. You know, they were, look, oh, isn't this a phenomenal building? He says, hey, look, there's going to come a time there won't be any of this standing. And don't you realize that, you know, I'm fitting you together and you are the temple. So I'm thinking that there is also the reference to the sacrifice of praise. And whether the dailies is referring to the sacrifice or not, I mean, it could be. Like you say, there's a lot of conjecture here and curious statements about it. But could it be that what's going to happen here is something that the world isn't going to be really aware of at all? If this is talking about the called out ones, i.e. the temple, and their dailies, their praise, their thanksgiving, their offerings of praise are cut off, could that in fact be the martyrdom of the saints? Is that what would be an abomination that would desolate the spiritual temple? So again, I don't know if that's been brought up, but it's maybe that's where this is going, because it seems that this fulfillment, you know, people are trying real hard to get the temple and the priesthood and the altars, etc., all figured out and have a literal fulfillment. And this would be something that the world simply wouldn't be aware of whatsoever if the spiritual temple was desecrated. That would not be showing up on the news, but in fact would be a significant prophetic event. So just some conjecture here.
So what I was thinking of while you were talking is that for us, the destruction of the second temple is an earth-shattering benchmark in the plan of salvation, right? At the time, do the Macedonians care? Do the people in the Far East care? They don't even know. They don't know what that temple is. So to say that this falling away and this martyrdom is going to be something that most of mankind misses, yeah, I can co-sign that. Just the few people who, you know, the scattered tribes who set up synagogues and had, you know, people all over the world in synagogues, they're the ones who cared about the temple, but the common man, you know, the regular people, they had no idea. So yeah, there's no reason to think that in the end times that the vast majority of humanity is going to go, yay, lawless one, we're sticking it to Yahweh. They're probably going to be ignorant, you know, but they do want to stick it to Yahweh, that's for sure, because they don't They don't like any type of judgment. They don't like any type of morality today. And so, yeah, all right. I'm okay with that theme. Yeah.
Any other thoughts, ideas? Scriptures that come to mind?
Here we go. Oh, here we go. A lot of high fives coming up.
Yeah. Tagore?
Okay, if others want to go, let them go. I'll come back a little later.
Bill?
Yeah, the Hebrew word there for the continual or the daily is tamid, and it means basically continuing, or I'll see what it says here. It basically means
Tame is offering.
what?
Tame is offering. Yeah.
No,
T-A-M-E.
according to the the Hebrew word, it means a stretch, a continual. It's a regular, or basic meaning is just continuing, as it says in Wilson's Old Testament word studies.
So yeah. So the when the prophet Daniel says the daily's going away, right? The prophet Daniel's talking about the daily offering. Right. There's no other daily that the prophet Daniel's talking about. I mean, sometimes we need to take a deep dive to figure out hidden stuff, but other times, it just is what it is. I mean, what we have to say, okay, well, golly, Daniel, what daily are you saying is going to go away?
No, it's not daily. It's time is going on without interruption, and we already have. With Rome changing times and laws, setting up a 10-day week. And then I was surprised to find out that France forced a 10-day week on all of Europe. It was anti all religions. And when in Daniel, we have the comment there about the one that comes is against all gods and has no desire of women. Very interesting in what's going on with atheists and with the gay movement.
Yeah. And I just did a quick search on offering. It said, so it came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to Yahweh. That's the word minshah, which is the same word for offering in Daniel 9. So it's the, he's bringing an offering to Yahweh. So when prophet Daniel talks about bringing an offering, he's talking about temple times,
Mitch, you're talking about Mishal?
Yeah.
Yeah, 4503. Yeah, that word means offering, but I don't think it exists in Daniel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was reading a minute ago in Daniel 9. Yeah, here's and you shall put the hands of. Let me do essential offering. Oh, that's a different one. So yeah. But it's not. I mean, it's not like. So he will make a firm covenant in the middle of the week. He'll put stop to sacrifice and grain offering. So if I click over to offering, if I click over to the word to the Strong's, grain offering is minshah. It's the same word, man. Yeah.
What verse is that in Daniel 9?
Daniel 9:27, bro. It's just offering. Yeah. He's going to put a stop to the sacrifice and grain offering. Right, which the sacrifice and the grain offering are the temple offerings. Yeah, that's not to say that there can't be a spiritual level to it or some future type of thing, but what Daniel's talking about is specifically the destruction of the temple in AD 70, which put an end to the daily, to all the offerings kaputs. Yeah.
Doesn't Hal have, Hal's in line ahead of me.
Not according to Zoom, but
No,
okay.
Oh, okay. All right, well, yeah, well, then I would like to just make a comment on the state of the latter temple that we can apply all this to if we still think that Second Thessalonians has to do with the eschatology, and then we look at the state of the latter temple that we find in Revelation 2 and 3, which we find one group is saying, I'm rich and increased with goods and I have need of nothing. But what happens to a person when they see themselves spiritually rich and not needy for anything? Their daily offering could cease, because if you're rich and you don't need anything, maybe your prayer will cease. If prayer is an offering, which it is, prayer is a sacrifice, isn't it? Which it is. Because you're offering up supplications and you're offering up adoration and worship. And when you are in prayer, you are recognizing your Father and His Son, our Savior. And so here's the thing about that. The daily offering suffers when your daily offering in your temple suffers when you see yourself as rich and in need of nothing. And I can see how that could connect also, that the daily offering would cease inside of you and I if we fail to see that our neediness and the necessity for that.
I totally agree that when times are good, people forget God. Totally agree. So, yeah, cool.
Hal?
That's really an excellent point, Al, where it would be happening due to the neglect or the ego, not thinking there was a need. I kind of got the impression that it would be forced, but beside the point. I was just wanting to, again, I apologize because I haven't been able to listen very much. We picked up when you began, Chris, but then had a phone call and a fairly lengthy one, so I missed a lot of what you said. But back to the Hanukkah, it struck me that as you mentioned the word Hanukkah, and Hanukkah means to dedicate and even consecrate. And the thing that I take away from this event, and as you pointed out, the multiplication of the oil is rather sketchy, but the people were willing to take a stand because they felt that, well, they knew that the temple truly had been compromised. And I believe that the contents were sacked and taken out, as I recall. And I couldn't help but think of the analogy to me. I'm a temple, and there have absolutely been times that I have gone where I shouldn't go, or I've been pulled into things I shouldn't do. And there are times I need to cleanse and rededicate this temple. And you think about this word Hanukkah, dedicated or consecrated. We could literally have shirts with that written on them on our chest, because that's what we are. We have been dedicated. We have been consecrated. And there will be cleansing, and there will be redeeming and reclaiming, because it's a battle. There are no ends of adversaries. And it's just inspiring to me that they literally put their life on the line to get this done. So I find it inspiring. There's a lot of the elements that are trivialized, in my opinion, but that's a heavy that I really relate with. This is a time to rededicate, and of course, it's a very reasonable time that the Mary became impregnated at this time, with the 9 months coming out directly at the fall feast. So that's just some random thoughts, and I'll stand by for news like Paul Harvey.